Okay, thank you. So thank you so much, Steve, for inviting me to speak here. Before we even get into this, how many of you are entrepreneurs? All right, okay. So just to say this is sort of geared in that direction, and also the truth of it is we all have a nervous system. So this benefits everybody. So given the theme of the month, what is endurance to you? And I'd love it if a word or a couple of words are popping to mind. I'd love to hear them.
Long-lasting.
Okay, lovely.
Perseverance. Longevity.
Yes, amazing.
Having a vision.
Pardon me?
Like having a vision.
Yep, totally. Yep. Okay, thank you. So, just kidding. There we go. Okay, so endurance. So the Merriam-Webster definition that I came across is the ability to withstand hardship or adversity. So that's cool, right? When it comes to how, like, were you actually taught how? No, right? A lot of us weren't. So we're expected to have this ability. So I taught preschool for a number of years. And one thing that came up often was I'd be chatting with parents about, what's coming up with their kiddo. And they're like, oh, kids are resilient, no big deal, they'll be fine. And it was like, ugh. It's not just like humans are resilient, yes, but we need to learn that as well. So anyway, so one thing that I'm not going super into this, but I wanted to just put this on here because I found this super interesting about the enduring pattern. So there are 5 personality patterns that are developed before we're 5 years old. This is typically from trauma or trying to keep ourselves safe or protect ourselves. So there is literally an enduring pattern. So endurance, when it's clean and clear and you're regulated in that, is a very, very positive trait, right? But it can very quickly flip to the toxic, sort of more shadowy side that gets often celebrated. So this is when I'm talking about the folks that are working super long hours, the ones that are at the office first and the last to leave. And this is like giving a pat on the back, even though they go home and they're like, fuck, I'm done. Like, I'm exhausted, but I'm gonna go do it again tomorrow because I'm celebrated for this, right? So you may be enduring, but if your nervous system is dysregulated, then you're in survival. So it kind of like goes against the whole idea of endurance, right? Okay, so what does the nervous system even have to do with this? So being a business owner is literally the best training grounds for nervous system regulation. How many people have had moments within, when starting your business, whatever it might be, that something happens and you explode and you're like, oh my God, how am I gonna do this? It's done, I'm over it, I'm quitting, that's it, throwing in the towel, right? When our nervous system is regulated and we can navigate all of those things that are going to happen, we're much better off to continue and to endure within our business, right? In healthy, clean ways. So when stress arises, this kind of goes back to the other question of, were you taught to navigate stress? Well, how well, what do you do when the challenges arise? You don't have to answer this, but just something to kind of reflect on. What do you do when stress comes up? Because it will, right? We all know that. And the reason why I teach this is because knowledge can equal regulation. So when we know how our system works, then this can bring regulation, even just in that, right? When we know what we want to do or what we need to do when certain things arise, we have that tool to self-regulate, right? Now, one thing that I have found personally as I've been growing my business is that, you are calling in this big life, right? But then you shrink at small problems. So you wake up in the morning, you stub your toe. Whole fucking day is done, right? Like, game over, I stubbed my toe, oh my God, like that's it. And so if this is my invite for you to feel into, is this how you respond to stress? Something happens, a small problem, right? And I'm not saying there's any same thing with emotions. There's no good or bad. There's no right or wrong here, but it just, when we look at it in perspective, how big is the problem that we're losing our shit about, right? So I'm gonna come back to that example, but here we get into the science. So this is where I try to keep this pretty accessible, but by all means, there will be some time for questions afterwards, so keep those in your mind. Basically, the vagus nerve is what controls our autonomic nervous system. So this is the superhighway between the brain and the body. This is the line of communication. It starts here at the brainstem. It's actually a pair of nerves, but goes down along the neck, splits, and comes down all the way down to the colon. So there's one branch that is above the diaphragm, one branch that is below. It touches pretty much everything along the way. So this is a pretty big deal. So when we consider this, there are 8 northbound lanes of communication. So 8 lanes coming from the body up to the brain. There are 2 going down. This is a big deal because all of those sensations, those cues that our body gives us, that is that communication of the nervous system, right? So this is how we know if we're safe. So this is what I guide folks to, is knowing what the sensations are that occur in your body when your body is trying to tell you, hey, this is not safe, right? Unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, that's not the best word. What we do in Western society is a sensation comes up. We don't know what the fuck it is because we haven't been taught what these things are. So we go to the doctor, right? What happens at the doctor, and again, this is a general opinion, so I know this is not all the time, but what tends to happen is, here you go, here's a Band-Aid, cover up the symptom and push the symptom, the sensation, further and further down, numb that feeling, and carry on with your life, right? So the thing with that feeling, though, with that symptom, that's often a trauma, a suppressed emotion, repressed memory. So when we just numb that feeling, it's going to keep coming back in different ways. So what may have started as increased heart rate, AKA what might be diagnosed as anxiety, then shifts to some pain, or then shifts to depression, or, so your body's going to keep trying to make you listen, right? So when we suppress that communication, though, of the vagus nerve to stay comfortable, then other issues will arise, right? So what happens along the vagus nerve when there's a traffic jam, shall we say, referring back to the superhighway example, then we're not as resilient as we could be. So this is where the stubbed toe then equals a huge reaction, right? Rather than, and I'm not saying suppress the emotions, like a stubbed toe is friggin' irritating. So you stub your toe, you say a few choice words, and you carry on, right? So all of this, the traffic jam pieces of it, the suppressed emotions, repressed memories, the traumas, all of this can be addressed with some trauma release modalities, one specifically being subconscious imprinting technique, which I do provide and teach. So now we get into polyvagal theory. So just know, these few slides I am touching on very, very briefly, right? This is something that I could do a whole week-long workshop on each one. So just know that like these are brief introductions. Look them up, ask me questions afterwards if you have more, like you want to know more, right? So polyvagal theory was developed by Dr. Stephen Porges in 1994, so relatively recently, right? And this is basically to say what we know of the autonomic nervous system is not as binary as we once thought. So we've been taught that we are either stressed or we're not stressed, right? We're in sympathetic, fight or flight, or we are in parasympathetic, rest and digest. This is not true. Not true at all. There's so much more to it, which again, like I'm touching on it, but what I'm sharing today is like surface level, and there's a lot deeper that we can go. So there are 3 organizing principles of polyvagal theory. And this is hierarchy. So I should have brought like a laser pointer. That would have been really fun, but I don't have it. So as I was talking about the vagus nerve, the branch that is above the diaphragm is the ventral vagus. So that's at the top of the ladder there. And when we look at hierarchy, it's basically that we have to go through each of these stages. So I'm going to explain that. So typically where we want to be is in ventral vagal. This is the safe, we're connected, we're socially engaged, we're present, we're focused. This is where ideally we want to spend most of our time. And we're human, so that doesn't happen, and it's good. We need the other stages. But where we start our day, let's say, is up in ventral. So we're safe, we're connected, we are, oh my God. Whoa, yes. Oh, fun. Okay, this just took a new turn. Yeah. Okay, so, okay, so this is like, I've made it. I'm using a laser pointer in front of people. Okay, so ventral vagal, here we are. We're safe, we're connected, we're social, we're focused, we're present, right? And something happens, we stub our toe, okay? Going back to the stub toe. We shift into sympathetic because now there's something that your body is like, I'm in danger. Okay, so we shift to sympathetic. So now we're mobilized, we're activated. And I will say that I use the term activated instead of triggered because, just sit with this for a moment, feel that word land, triggered. Ooh, like to me, my body's like, even just hearing that word, I'm responding to it, right? So I use the word activated instead of that, but here we are, we get activated and we shift into that mobilized energy, right? If our system feels like we can't handle the threat that's in front of us, then we will shift into dorsal. So that is the longer branch that goes all the way down to the colon underneath the diaphragm. And this is where we find immobilized, we're collapsed, we're frozen, we're shut down, we're dissociated, all of those things, right? Pardon me. So this is the pathways of response. What happens the other way too is that when we're down here in freeze or shut down, we have to go through sympathetic to get back up to ventral. Now this can be really confusing because if you're in a very low depressed state, shall we say, if depression is something that you experience, if you're down here, you start to come out of that into sympathetic and you might get angry. You might get a little ragey because your energy is increasing, right? Which can feel scary because now you're like, well, fuck, now I'm just like raging. And now you go back down here. So this is why it's super important to know about this hierarchy because it can give you a little bit of an indication of like, okay, I'm not crazy or I'm not like, there's not anything wrong with me. This is how my system works, right? Okay, and neuroception. I feel like now I'm just going to use this thing the whole time. I don't need my notes anymore. Oh, because I'm just like swinging around like this? Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's really good to know. Okay, neuroception. So second one here. This is detection without awareness. So this is our body's way of detecting safety. So back to the vagus nerve. So it runs all the way down from the brainstem to the colon. It also innervates these little muscles in our face, innervates the muscles beside the eyes, connects to the pharynx and larynx. So these are all ways that we can tell if someone is safe, or pardon me, that we detect beneath awareness whether or not someone is safe. The thing with neuroception, when we have experienced trauma or chronic stress, it can be a little faulty, shall we say. So this is why it's so important to navigate and deal with the trauma and the chronic stress that we have trapped in our bodies, because we all do. Because that neuroception will, this is kind of another, like, do you notice that you go into a room and all of a sudden you're like, ugh. Like, how do you feel walking into this space? If you were new coming here today, or, you know, whatever the story is, how do you feel walking in here around other people? Your system is responding to everyone else's system in this room. So, the next organizing principle is co-regulation. So we need other humans and animals. Animals are really great for co-regulation as well. But do you notice when you're with certain people and you leave and you are completely drained? Just fucking done. And then there are other people that you spend time with them and you are so energized, you feel full, you feel nourished. That is someone that that feels safe to your system. So that is who you want to be around, or to phone, or whoever, when you are having a challenging time, right? So for a long time, I was very much like, I don't fucking need anybody. I am a lone wolf. I am strong. I'm independent, you know. You agree? Yeah. Yeah, and it's not true. It's not true. We literally need people. We needed someone to bring us into this world. We needed people to nourish us when we couldn't do it ourselves. We need people. So, very important. So, basically how we can see polyvagal theory is like the science of safety. We need to feel like when we can see the world through a polyvagal lens, we can see others and ourselves with more compassion. Because then we know, oh, that person might not just be like losing their shit at me because I'm a horrible person. They are likely in a state of survival right now, right? Pardon me. Okay, window of tolerance. So this is really, really important to know, because this window here in the middle can get smaller. It can get real small. So if we have navigated chronic stress, trauma, that window can be very, very small. So why I'm sharing this is because I invite you to feel into, over the next week, shall we say, what kind of reactions are you having? And I say reaction, not response. But what kind of reaction are you having when stress arises? Do you shift up here, like I said with the stub toe? So now you're hyper aroused, you're in that fight or flight state. You're activated. The sensations you might be feeling are increased heart rate, sweating, tension, these kind of things. So do you shift up here and then stay here all day? Or you're here, you're in your, like, this is kind of confusing when it comes to looking at the ladder and now the window of tolerance, because they're kind of switched around. But ultimately the green in the middle here is the ventral vagal space. So do you go from here, shift into navigating whatever stress has arisen, and then come back down? If so, then your window is probably fairly large. But if you notice that you get stressed out and then you don't come back down, then your window is probably pretty small. This can change day to day as well. So if I get a shitty sleep, then my window will be a little bit smaller. I will have bigger reactions to things, right? But I invite you to feel into this, because this is where we develop resilience. When we increase that window, then I can go through the day and be like, you know, I can get an email that says, oh, this project didn't work out. You have to redo the whole thing and you have to do it by the end of the day. And I'm like, ugh. So I get activated. I shift into a more mobilized state so that I can navigate that stress, and then I come back down, right? Or maybe you don't, and maybe you notice that you're just kind of anxious all the time. These things can change, right? So this is why I do the work that I do, because 15 years ago, I didn't even think I'd be alive right now. So this is so important to know that this can change. You don't have to live in that stuck state. So often if we're stuck in hyperarousal, that's where you'll get the diagnosis of anxiety, panic attacks, that kind of thing. If you shift down into the hypoarousal, this is where you're going to get the diagnosis of depression. This is where you'll be shut down, you'll be withdrawn, you'll be isolating, these kind of things, right? So many people, we get stuck there because, again, going back to the beginning, we're not taught how to deal with this stuff. We're not taught how to navigate stress. Also, the idea of trauma, like a lot of, has anyone read any Dr. Gabor Mate books? Oh my gosh, hugely recommend him. He's incredible. But he is a doctor, and he states that a lot of medical schooling does not include anything about trauma, or very minimal, right? So this is a big deal, because trauma is not really what we thought it was. It's anything that's too much, too fast, too soon for the nervous system to process, or not enough for a long period of time. So this is really important to note, because you can relieve these symptoms of unprocessed trauma, right? Okay, so what even is nervous system dysregulation then? If you look at that list, this is when we're stuck in, again, hyper or hypoarousal. So if you look at those things, I'm going to guess you probably don't only experience one of them. There are probably a few. Can anyone relate with any of these things? Maybe experienced one or two along, yeah. So why does all of this matter in business? Well, I mean, the first one, lack of focus, right? That's a big deal. Like, if we can't focus and get stuff done in our business that we are the sole, I mean, I work solo, so depends on how you work, but if I'm not able to focus, then I'm not getting shit done in business, and things aren't moving forward, right? So that's a pretty big deal. You might be foggy, you might be forgetful, you might have anxiety. So let's say you're stepping into an important meeting with a client, and all of a sudden everything comes up, and you're like, oh my God, I can't sit still, I can't, and how are you gonna sit and build trust with a client in that state, right? Again, depending on how you work. But another thing that I will say, anxiety, depression, ADHD, IBS, these are symptoms of nervous system dysregulation. So I know that may not be a popular opinion, but these are symptoms of nervous system dysregulation caused by unprocessed trauma, suppressed emotion, repressed memories, and all of these things can be addressed. All of these things can change, right? So these things also, so all of these symptoms here these are true, right? These are true things that we feel. So I'm not saying that none of these things aren't things because they're a symptom of nervous system dysregulation. Like, we'll still get diagnosed with certain things on that list, right? The symptoms are true, but it does not have to be your truth. It does not have to be your identity. And I say this because for myself, when I was diagnosed with a whole fucking list of things, well, then what happened? Oh, I can't do that because of my depression. Oh, I probably shouldn't do that because of my anxiety. It's too bad. I won't be able to get through that because of my anxiety. It's like taking all this weight, putting it on the shoulders and being like, this is my life now. I can't do any of these things. Now, I'm not saying that things weren't harder to do a little bit, but it shifts when, if we say like, you know, the symptoms that I'm experiencing make it a little more challenging for me to go do this thing, right? Rather than taking it on as our own identity. Okay, so now these are some tools to use in the moment. What I want to make really, really clear as well, if you look up some videos, let's say, if you go onto YouTube and you're like, what do I do for my anxiety? You will find things that will say, hack your anxiety, get rid of it with this one tip. Not true. Not true. Okay? So if you ever find a practitioner that is telling you that, don't work with them. Do not work with them. You have to address the trauma. You have to address the stuff that's underneath that's causing the symptoms. Now, that being said, these things here are tools that you can use in the moment. You may have seen me just bouncing right before we started. This is to come back into my body, decrease that charge a little bit, right? So that I can be here, I can be present, I can be focused and share what I want to share. So basically what we want to do is, if we are in that red zone of the window of tolerance, we want to decrease the charge. We want to come back down. I really like to view this like our window of tolerance. You can view it basically from your stomach and up. And what I mean by this is your dorsal zone here. This is your ventral. So this is your window of tolerance. This is hypo-arousal, and this is hyper-arousal. So when we want to decrease the charge, a lot of things, we get ruminating thoughts, racing thoughts with anxiety, that kind of thing, right? So we want to come back from being stuck in our head, back into our heart. What can we do here? This can be done through movement. I recommend movement first. Bring that charge down. So like shaking, I just mean shake your arms. Do whatever feels good for your body, because this will be different for you than it will be for me. So for me, I like bouncing. So I bounce and I just let things like shake around and I bounce. And then sometimes even if I have a lot of energy here, then I'll tap or tone. You could even scream a little, make it a little louder if you've got a lot here, right? So it depends on how your body will respond. But if you are a runner, if you want to flee when you get stressed, then your legs are going to tense up. Your butt cheeks might tense up a little bit, right? So how can you consciously contract that? Consciously contract and expand. You can't see that so much with my butt cheeks, I guess, but I'll do it with my shoulders. How about that? So if you move into fight, if you get angry and irritable, then you're going to feel your shoulders tense up, your hands might tense up. So consciously move into that. Okay, thanks, body. Move into that, release it. Move into that, release it. Another thing, toning, like I said, that screaming into a pillow is really good, punching a pillow. Another thing that's really, really good here is a cold splash. So whether that be go to the washroom, put cold water on your hands, put it on your neck, because this is where your vagus nerve runs, right? Put it there, literally just cool your jets. Cool it down. The other way is when we are in hypo-arousal, we want to increase that energy, right? So how we're going to do that, tapping, change your posture. So if you notice when you're feeling low, if you experience symptoms of depression, you're probably kind of like here, right? You're in that position of not feeling great. So if you simply sit up, that will show your body, that will cue your body like, oh yeah, okay, I can feel open, expansive. So rocking can be a really good one here too, squeezing. So squeeze and rock. That can be really good just to feel into your body, coming back into your body, right? A gentle shake can be good here, but not too intense. And call a friend, because again, we need other people. We need other people. So when you're in hypoarousal, that's going to be the last fucking thing you want to do. Every single part of you is going to be like, I don't want to burden them. I don't want to like be a pain in the ass, whatever it might be. Call a friend. Connection dissolves shame. Huge. One thing that I didn't touch on actually in the other slide that's very important, when it comes to nervous system dysregulation, who here, when you're out in a restaurant, let's say, you've got one person sitting directly in front of you, and you can hear every other conversation around you. You could hear word for word what they're saying 4 tables away, but you cannot hear the person in front of you. Does anyone experience this? All right, you've been living in survival for a very long time. And this is what, because your eardrums will go slack when we've been in those states so that we can hear predators, right? So this is something really, really important to note, because there are tools that can change that. So this is, again, the friggin' beauty of it. There is a modality called Safe and Sound Protocol that is an auditory, non-invasive application of polyvagal theory that will, from the inside out, increase your resilience. It will bring you to that place of safety. So, super important. I wanted to share that because, again, that impacts business. If you can't hear the person that you're having a business meeting with and you're like, pardon me, can you just, what? That's, you know, might get a little too close. Okay. There we are. So if any of that resonated with you, the QR code is actually for a complimentary Stoke Your Fire call. So this is not on my website. So if there was anything that like, oh shit, I got some work to do, you can book a call. I have a lot of different options, and a lot of things actually aren't on my site as well because this work is so customized, right? So that's it. I'm in the midst of rebranding as well. So you see Kristi Sky Healing and Soma Sky Wellness. So yeah, they're both there. Soma Sky Wellness is the new one. My website is not quite ready yet. So still working with both. I'm just kind of like straddling the line. I've got brochures, I've got business cards here. So I think we have some time for questions. Thanks so much for listening.